Good afternoon. I'm Frank Corbett with ATI. I'm one of the senior master instructors for our institution, and I teach classes every month both to new home inspectors and other home inspectors that are seasoned but might be changing states or let their license expire and are looking for some more education. Something that continually amazes me is that when these inspectors come in that have had all this experience, I get quotes like, "I never knew that," or "we never did it that way," or "that's not how I was taught." Well, that's okay. One of the common misinspected items happens to be our decks and our stairs on the exterior of the building. There is a misunderstanding that somehow the stairs can be different and the supports don't need to be exactly the same and they can be further apart. Well, nothing would be further from the truth. So we'll start by covering a few of the basics on inspecting these stairs and this deck. Let's start off with the names. This area here that we put our tread of our foot on, well, it's called the treads. The part that rises in the back, that's the riser. And that sawtooth thing that strings it all together, well, it's a stringer. Of course, we have our posts, we have our handrails or stair rails. Guardrails are the horizontal ones. These are handrails or stair rails. And we refer to the spindles in between now as balusters. And it's important that we know the spacing and the sizes on all of these. For the tread, it's pretty simple. It's equal to or greater than 10 inches. So even my giant size 13 foot fits on there with just a little bit over. The risers, so that we're not having to lift our feet up too far up and we don't trip, equal to or less than 7 inches. As far as the handrail goes, I know that on my body it's between my pocket and my belt, which is 34 to 38 inches for the handrail. But the problem is, including on this one, this is one of the misinspected items on decks. This really isn't a handrail. It's not complete. A handrail means that you can get your hand around it, both your thumb and your fingers on both sides. In other words, what's called a grippable rail. It can't just be a 2x4 like this. This is almost there, but we would list this on the inspection report as incomplete, needs a handrail cap, something that's grippable. As far as the posts, they're solid, but here's a couple things that are always missed by so many home inspectors. The minute that the riser opening is equal to or greater than 4 inches, it requires a physical riser board to be installed. Its absence is considered a safety hazard because it's a possible trip hazard. The other thing that we have is on the stringers, the area that we call the spine. Now the spine is the distance between the deepest cut and the back of the riser board. Let's take a closer look at this one. So again, measuring from the area of the deepest cut to the back side of the stringer needs to be a minimum of 5 inches. Why? Well, because that's its strength. If you think about the wood is a whole bunch of ropes all together. And if I cut out too many sections of those ropes, the only strength that's left is whatever rope is remaining. Well, anything less than 5 inches worth of wood, it's undersized and it needs to be replaced. It can't be repaired, it's got to be replaced. When we look at this one, we have a total of 3 inches. Now, how does this happen? These are homemade stringers. The homeowner was probably trying to save a few dollars instead of buying the cut stringers, which are meant with the full-size spine to be installed unaltered. They bought a smaller piece of timber, measured up the stairs to be where they were supposed to be as far as those measurements, but forgot about the size of the spine. After a while, this is going to give way. It's kind of like an elephant on giraffe legs. It may hold for a little while, but eventually it's going to collapse. Let's talk about our baluster spacing. The actual opening between the balusters, what we used to call spindles, is a maximum of 4 inches. Now my fist just happens to be exactly 4 inches, so I don't need to whip out a tape measure every time. I can go along and check very quickly. On the stair rails, also known as the handrails, there is a variance. That means it doesn't have to be exactly the same. It can be up to 4 3/8 of an inch wide, but on the stair rails only. On guardrails, 4 inches or less. The opening at the bottom, 4 inches or less. This is all based upon the size of infants' heads and pet heads, so that they don't get through there and then become trapped, which obviously is a safety concern. So checking for this spacing is actually fairly straightforward. We don't want any gaps where someone's head can get stuck if they're of that small size or of that furry breed of human. Amongst all the airplane noise and typical sounds of the neighborhood, let's talk a little bit more about guardrails. Remember, on the stairs we have stair rails, handrails, but up here we have guardrails. Guardrails are required the moment that the walking surface is equal to or greater than 30 inches above grade. Does that mean by some miracle that at 29 inches it doesn't need one? No. Because we're not tied to a municipal code or ordinance, we use common sense. We can recommend they consider installing a handrail for additional safety if we feel and can support objectively that it would be a benefit. Now, as far as its height, 36 to 42 from the deck is the range where modern construction is at. But if you're inspecting vintage homes, that's not going to be the case. If it is how it was approved at the time this house was built, and it still meets those standards, still performing as intended without any deficits, it is a notation that it's less than modern standards. But don't go telling your client that they've got to rip that handrail off of that 1790 home and replace it with modern standards. That is not the case anywhere. Let's talk about the difference between attached decks and freestanding decks. There is a miseducation out there that just because it's next to the house, that it has to be attached to the house. Well, that's completely false. If you think about decks that are built next to freestanding, above ground pools, those decks are not attached to the house, but they have to be built in a manner where they are self-supporting, appear to be structurally sound, and serving their intended purpose. The same goes for the decks that are next to the house. This happens to be a freestanding deck. There is a very clear gap between the siding and the backboard on this, which would have been the ledger originally. This is built just like a deck that would have been a standalone in the yard, but it's built next to the house. The reasons people do this, well, they have their own reasons for that. What's our job? We look to make sure that it is just like any other freestanding deck, serving its intended purpose or performing as intended or expected. It has the extra support posts underneath. It has all its beams. It has all of its joists, which are 16 on center and are supposed to be 16 on center. And it's doing everything it needs to do. So the fact that it's not attached to the house is not a deficiency, and it's nothing that needs to be corrected. Lastly, let's talk about board spacing. It is important that there be a break between the boards. When the boards are pinched together and water gets in there, the water gets held there. We call it capillary action. Something we can explain in a different video, but essentially when it's pinched together, like it is over on this board, the water is going to get trapped in there and stay there, and that's where it's going to begin to rot. Just a little bit of space is all that's necessary in between. Something as thin as a dime. As long as there's that capillary break between the floorboards, whether they happen to be natural wood or man-made materials, it's actually critical to the longevity of the deck. Now remember, when we're talking about treated lumber, it is treated with copper oxide, and copper doesn't like any other metal. So if the correct fasteners were not used, that copper oxide is literally going to dissolve those other metals, and we'll see it in the form of rusting and deterioration. It's not going to be a secret. When we're talking about new decks that are still wet with their treatment, as home inspectors, we're supposed to document any bare wood that needs protection. Well, the decks already have protection, and they cannot receive additional protection until such time as they do what's called seasoning. They've reached a dryness point where they can accept stains or paints or other sealants. Now, if we detect any visible rot because it's not protected, well, that's a different story, and that in itself is deficiency. So if you are a seasoned home inspector and items like this interest you, keep coming back for the ATI HIDEF videos. If you're looking to become a home inspector, well, look in the credits for our website, and you can go to that website. It'll give you all the information for your state and the requirements that are there, and some of the background on ATI and what we can do for you in becoming a future home inspector. For ATI, I'm Frank Corbett. We'll see you in the next video.